Let's get started. Good morning. We're having technical difficulties. Welcome to First Parish Church at Billerica, a Unitarian Universalist welcoming congregation. We're still having a few technical bugs. Can people hear me? I'll just have my hand over the mic then. Whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you're welcome here this morning. And we invite you to here we go, stay after the service for coffee and conversation. My name's Brita. I'll be the worship assistant for today's service. And our worship leader this morning is Reverend Nannene Gowdy. She was our minister for a number of years. She is just a wonderful preacher. She has so much knowledge and experience to share. And we are so happy to have her with us here this morning. Are there any announcements? Well, our announcements people aren't here. Okay, in that case, I just want to begin by acknowledging that First Parish Church was built on the unceded land of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts people. We acknowledge the connection that they have continued to maintain with the land here in this place that we call Billerica. And we recognize the hardships they have endured and commit ourselves to caring for the land and fostering good relationships with our Indigenous neighbors. Did you have any announcements, Lisa? We have some announcement people.
Hello, my name is Lisa Jameson, and I work with the children and youth here at First Parish. Any youth that are interested, we will be going down to the RE room after Time for All Ages. Thank you.
Great. Any other announcements? Teresa? No. Okay. Okay. Our chalice lighting.
Good morning. Is this loud enough for everybody? Does anybody need it turned up? You need it up a little?
Thumbs up, awesome.
Okay. All right. Let's join together in the words for the chalice lighting, which are in your order of service. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather together in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. Let's join in the words for the affirmation of faith, which are in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
This is a time in our service when we invite those, well, we do invite those who wish, but we have to remind people that our Unitarian Universalist churches are self-supporting, and your gifts of time and treasure is what sustains the work of the church. The morning's offering will now be taken and gratefully accepted. Yeah, Teresa, can you come help me?
As I will be doing all this church year, I will be lifting up the contributions that women have made to the United States. Lately, it seems, these contributions have been forgotten as our rights have been eroded. We need to remember our history. I have started each month with a Unitarian woman, and this month will be no different. I will also be highlighting 5 women who have contributed in chronological order. Since December is National Human Rights Month, I am starting with Susan B. Anthony. She was born a Quaker and was active in social action at an early age. By 17, she was collecting signatures on an anti-slavery petition. Eventually, she was involved in collecting 400,000 signatures. When she was 28, her family began attending the Unitarian Church in Rochester, New York. She remained a member there for the rest of her life. At age 31, she became active in women's rights, campaigning to get the vote for women. Susan B. Anthony was first arrested at the age of 52 for trying to vote. After a widely covered trial, she declined to pay the fine levied against her, and Rochester, New York, wisely agreed to forget it. She spent the rest of her life traveling around the country, trying to get the vote for women, giving 75 to 100 speeches a year. Remember that this was during a time when women were not supposed to speak in public. Seen as a hellraiser, she was accused of trying to destroy the institution of marriage. In 1878, she got the US Congress to propose a constitutional amendment giving women the right to vote. The amendment was finally ratified in 1920, the 100th anniversary of Susan B. Anthony's birth. Unfortunately, she didn't live to see it happen, as she died in 1906. However, she did receive honors during her lifetime. On her 80th birthday, she was celebrated at the White House by President William McKinley. She was also the first woman citizen to be honored with having her picture on a US coin, the silver dollar. Moving ahead 40 years, I'd like to lift up Jane Addams. Born into a large, wealthy family in Illinois, she knew tragedy early. 4 of her siblings died, and then when Jane was only 2, her mother died giving birth to her 9th child. At 4, Jane got tuberculosis of the spine, which gave her lifelong health problems. Her father was a friend of Abraham Lincoln's. An avid reader, she became interested in helping the poor by reading Charles Dickens, a Unitarian in England. Like Anthony, she was also involved in getting women the right to vote, but she is best known for being a social worker at Hull House in Chicago. There, they provided extensive support for poor, mostly immigrant families. I had a 1-year interim in Chicago and passed Hull House walking to and from the church, Second Unitarian Church of Chicago, and my apartment. It's an unimposing building, and it is amazing that Jane Addams was able to do so much from there. She is acknowledged as the founder of the social work profession in the United States. Yale University gave her the first honorary degree it ever conferred on a woman. An advocate for world peace, she was the first woman awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Adams was one of the founders of the American Civil Liberties Union in 1920. She also had her picture on a US postage stamp in 1940, 5 years after her death. Jane Addams was a lesbian who had 2 lovers. The first helped her establish Hull House, and the second was with her for 40 years. Jane Addams has received numerous awards from LGBTQ+ organizations as a trailblazer. My favorite on the list is Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Born in 1884 into a wealthy and even more famous family than Adams, she came out of the shadow of the other Roosevelts to become a shining star. Both of her parents and her brother died by the time she was 10. She then went to live with her maternal grandmother, who gave her little affection. She grew up thinking she was an unloved, ugly duckling. When she was 21, I think Franklin saw worth in his 5th cousin and had the good sense to marry her. They eventually had 6 children, so he couldn't have found her too ugly. However, his philandering did great damage to her self-esteem. Eleanor also had a mother-in-law from hell. After Franklin got polio and was paralyzed, Eleanor became his eyes and ears in public. She gave speeches for him, traveled down into coal mines to report conditions to him, and urged him into social justice areas he might not have gone by himself. Her energy was amazing. While First Lady of the United States, she also held regular press conferences, wrote a daily newspaper column, wrote a monthly magazine column, hosted a weekly radio show, and spoke at a National Party convention. Occasionally, she publicly disagreed with her husband's policies. She was heavily criticized for advocating rights for African Americans and for women. After her husband died, she spent the next 17 years working for the good of others. She pressed the United States to support the United Nations in its founding and became its first delegate. She chaired the first UN Commission on Human Rights and oversaw the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Later, she chaired the Kennedy administration's Presidential Commission on the Status of Women. There is also a trait in her that I admire a lot in people. She was willing to learn new ways of thinking and remained open. Early in her life, she expressed anti-Semitic thoughts, but changed over the years. By the time Israel was established, she was one of their biggest supporters and had many Jewish friends. Adlai Stevenson, who ran for US president 4 times, was a very close friend of hers, and he was also a Unitarian. When Eleanor Roosevelt died in 1945, she was one of the most esteemed women in the world. Ella Baker was born 19 years after Eleanor Roosevelt was. The century had turned. While Roosevelt was very public, Baker preferred working behind the scenes. She worked alongside famous leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, A. Philip Randolph, and Martin Luther King, yet few people have heard about her. Baker grew up in the South and got her ideas of social justice listening to her grandmother tell about being enslaved. Among other injustices, her grandmother was whipped and beaten for refusing to marry the enslaved man of her owner's choosing. In the 1930s, Baker moved to Harlem and worked on Negro cooperatives, where they tried to establish Black economic power through cooperative efforts. She also founded the Negro History Club at the Harlem Library. Baker advocated widespread local action as a means of social change. Her emphasis on the grassroots approach to the struggle for equal rights influenced the growth and the success of the civil rights movement. As the highest ranking woman at the NAACP, she constantly urged them to organize from the roots up. Her behind the scenes work got the people on the street involved in social justice. Ella Baker died in 1986. 13 years later, in 1999, Emma Gonzalez was born. It is not likely we would have heard her name yet had it not been for the tragic shooting at Stoneham Douglas High School in Florida, where Gonzalez was a student. As the result of the shooting, Gonzalez became a leader in advocating for gun control and helped organize the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. on March 24th, 2018. There were 880 sibling demonstrations that went on around the country at the same time. Gonzalez was brilliant in March. They strode out onto the stage and listed the names of the 17 students who had died in the school shooting. Then Gonzalez went silent. I was watching on TV and time ticked by. At first, I thought they were overcome and was trying to get composed. Then more time went by. Dead air. It was called the loudest silence in the history of social protest. After 6 minutes and 20 seconds, Gonzalez spoke again, telling about the impact of what had happened in those 6 minutes and 20 seconds, in which 17 friends were killed and another 15 were injured. Millions of people were glued to their TV sets, and an advocate of gun control was born. This wasn't the first excellent speech Gonzalez had given. A few days after the shooting, the speech they gave at a gun control rally in Florida ended with her saying this: "The people in the government who were voted into power are lying to us. And us kids seem to be the only ones who notice, and our parents, to call BS. Companies try to make caricatures of teenagers these days, saying that we are all self-absorbed and trend obsessed, and they shush us into submission when our message doesn't reach the ears of the nation. We are prepared to call BS. Politicians who sit in their gilded House and Senate seats, funded by the NRA, telling us that nothing could be done to prevent this, we call BS. They say tougher laws do not decrease gun violence. We call BS. They say a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. We call BS. They say guns are just tools like knives and are as dangerous as cars. We call BS. They say no laws could have prevented the hundreds of senseless tragedies that have occurred, we call BS. That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works, we call BS. If you agree, register to vote. Contract your local congresspeople. Give them a piece of your mind. I don't think we've heard the last of Emma Gonzalez. Now a college graduate, I hope they will return to being a gun control advocate and once again be selected by Time magazine as one of the 100 most important people of the year. People are often shocked by the female protesters of today, just as people were in the past. Tactics, beliefs, behavior, and language used in fighting injustice often aren't ladylike. If someone refuses to consider correcting a social injustice over things like this, instead of honoring those who stand up for their rights, then I too call BS. Let's join together in the words for extinguishing the chalice, which are in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. How short the daylight hours have now become, how gray the skies, how barren seem the trees. A damp and chilling wind has gripped my mind and made me gloomy too. But there is that in me which reaches up toward light and laughter, bells and carolers, and knows that my religious myth and dream of reborn joy and goodness must be true, because it speaks the truths of older myths, that light returns to balance darkness, life surges in the evergreen and us, and babes are hope and saviors of the world as miracles abound in common things. Rejoice and join in the gladness of Christmas.